What's up, y'all? Hater here, and in today's video we're going over build crafting 101 in Once Human. I'll be going over 10 different tips, tricks, and just some information that I've come across from my time in the game so far. With this video, I hope to help y'all better understand the build crafting process and everything that goes into it, and use these tips to build better and stronger builds. These tips will range from what may seem like common sense, as some things are clearly outlined in game, while others are tips you may not know about unless you stumble upon them or figure it out on your own. But I'm not going to yap any longer. Let's get right into the tips with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is all about the different types of builds you can create in Once Human. From Shrapnel to Frost Vortex and Power Surge, there are 10 different build types you can focus on. I won't waste your time by reading all of them out, but you can view what they all are, what they do, as far as whether they provide things like a continuous debuff, have special ammo effects, or even area of effect or instant damage. You can also view what the formula is for figuring out your damage if you enjoy the math side of build crafting, or if you're like me, just make a test dummy on your territory and test them out there. On to tip number 2, and we're talking about the rarity tiers of weapons and armor. There are 4 tiers of rarity when talking about the gear you'll be crafting. Starting from the lowest or most common and working our way up, greens are common, blues are rare, purples are epic, and golds are legendary. When you're leveling, you'll most likely be focusing on blues and purples, as you'll be collecting blueprints while clearing strongholds. Golds or legendaries will only drop from the wish machine, either as a direct purchase or as a chance drop from random pulls. This brings us to tip number 3, and we're talking about fragments and blueprints and how to use them to both craft and upgrade your gear. When you get a weapon or armor piece from the mystic crates around the strongholds, they'll give you what's known as a blueprint, which is essentially just enough fragments of the weapon or armor to allow you to craft it. If you look at these blast suit boots, I have 50 fragments of the required 10 to craft it, meaning if I were to craft these, I would have 40 fragments left over to either craft other armor pieces in the same set or use them to upgrade this one piece. You can think of the fragments as the building blocks to crafting. Earn enough, and you can craft the initial level of that piece of gear. If you have additional fragments, you can use these to further increase the level, or as I like to call it, the star rating on that piece of gear. These fragments also belong to a certain family or brand of gear. In this case, we'll look at the Wanderer brand. This green AR can be upgraded from 1 star to 2 stars with fragments from other weapons that are from the Wanderer brand, and in this case I have 30 fragments of the Mr. Squid LMG that's also a Wanderer piece that I can use to upgrade. There are 3 methods to acquiring additional fragments for gear. The first is through clearing strongholds. This is only for rare and epic gear sets, as clearing certain regions' strongholds will award you enough fragments to either craft that full armor set, or you can craft 1 or 2 of those pieces and use the remaining fragments to upgrade those set pieces, like you see that I've done here with my heavy duty set. The second and third require the wish machine. You can choose to just roll the wish machine and hope you randomly get fragments or blueprints for the gear you want, like I did when I got my extra pioneer fragments, or with many of the legendary and some of the epic pieces, you can save your star crom and buy them outright, awarding you extra fragments to eventually upgrade that piece of gear. Tip number 4 is all about the key armor, or as I like to refer to them as uniques. These epic and legendary pieces are standalone pieces of armor that do not belong to a full set, but rather have their own unique set of perks tailored specifically around a damage type. They'll have a glow on the top right of their in-game icon, making it very obvious that these pieces of gear are their own strong addition to your build. While these armor pieces can drastically increase the lethality of your build, it's worth noting that you can only have 1 unique armor piece on at any point in time, regardless of whether it's epic or legendary. So when you're choosing what damage type you want to build around, it's worth noting what uniques boost that type of build and try to acquire them. For example, I use a Frost Vortex build with the AR Abyss Glance, so I want to use a unique that boosts my Frost Vortex like Frost Tactical Vest or Doyen's Cloak. On to tip number 5, and this revolves all around mix matching different sets to maximize your build's potential. Like I said earlier, gear sets give you a total of 4 perks if you have 4 pieces of that gear set equipped, but there are times when having a 4th piece of gear might not be in your best interest. Instead, you can look to drop that 4th piece, potentially saving fragments and allowing you to boost another piece in the process, so that you can run a 2-piece bonus from another set. It would look something like this. I have my unique armor piece, a 3-piece set, and a 2-piece set. You can always shuffle them around depending on which slots you have available, but this style of mix matching gear sets can sometimes be much more powerful depending on the build you're running. Tip number 6 is all about recalibration and why you should recal your weapons and armor. When you found out which piece of gear you want to run for your build, you can upgrade either the damage output for weapons or your HP and psi intensity for armor at your gear workbench by spending certain materials. There are 2 caveats to doing this. The first, unless you have an influx of materials, mainly Stardust source, you won't really want to recal your weapons and armor until they're tier 5. The reason being is that you only get a certain percentage of the materials back when deconstructing. So if you fully calibrate a tier 4 weapon, then hit level 40 and are able to make tier 5, it'll be crafted at recal plus 0, and you'll have to start all over on the process. And secondly, if you upgrade that weapon with fragments to its next level, adding more stars, you'll have to recal from the beginning as well. So ideally, don't recal unless you think you'll be using that weapon or armor piece for a very long time. Tip number 7 again revolves around recalibrating, but this time we're talking about recal blueprints. If you notice, each weapon has certain benefits it receives from hitting certain levels of recalibration. You can change these, noting that you'll still need to hit the recal levels to use them, by finding weapon recalibration blueprints. You have a chance to find weapons with these blueprints from either defeating elites, opening gear and weapon crates, or spending controllers on the chest at the end of certain activities like silos and bosses. You'll know a weapon has a blueprint on it by seeing this symbol on the weapon info screen. You can then break that weapon down at your deconstruction bench to acquire that blueprint and reapply it to any weapon of the same archetype. So blueprints from ARs will only be usable on other ARs, blueprints from shotguns will only be usable on other shotguns, so on and so forth. It's worth noting that you can get any tier blueprint from any tier weapon. I've even broken down a rare weapon and gotten a legendary blueprint to drop off it. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled when opening higher level chests so you can start stockpiling weapon blueprints to recal your builds. On to tip number 8, and for this one we're talking about CRADLE mods. These will unlock for you based on either your individual level or phase progression for the server, with a total of 8 being able to be equipped at any one point in time. Pay close attention to these mods as they can drastically increase your build's effectiveness. You'll only have a few slots available to equip these mods just from completing the main storyline and defeating the Great Ones, and the rest will require you to complete some of the silos scattered around the map. Depending on what damage type your build uses, you'll want to carefully look these over and slot whichever your build benefits from. So if you're using a shrapnel build, for example, you'd want to make sure to use the mods Deadly Combo and Bullet Hunt. Or if you're using a Frost Vortex build, looking at using things like Status Enhancement and Sustained Suppression. Tip number 9 brings Deviants to the mix for build crafting. Some of these little guys can actually boost the damage output of certain builds depending on the damage type. For example, the Jellyfish Deviant from the Cargo Shuffle event is a great addition to a Frost Vortex build, as its auto attack perk states continuously deal frost status damage to surrounding enemies and force them to move towards you, increases frost damage received by surrounding targets by 31.5%. If frost vortexes are formed inside the radius, it creates additional ice spikes. Or the Pyro Dino's autonomous attack, which states that it autonomously attacks enemy targets, increases target blaze damage received by 24.5%, and when attacking targets affected by burn, causes 1 explosion. This brings us to the final and arguably most important tip for build crafting in Once Human: have fun with your build. There's so many great options that can be effective in this game that you can clear pretty much anything with pretty much any build. Now, obviously, some will be better than others at ad clear versus single target damage, and highly crafted builds will definitely feel strong compared to those that are still being built. So don't let any one person dictate what you use. Use what you want and have fun. That's going to be it for today's video. I'll be putting out some fun builds over the course of the first season that I personally enjoy, like my Abyss Lance Frost Vortex build. So if you're looking for build videos or build crafting advice, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comment section below what build you're going for. That's it for me. I'm done. I'm out, and I'll see you on the next one.